And then that by 80% of the Jewish population have been destroyed in Poland only. But let's go back to my life, the life of a generation which went through a hell, and only a few survived the terrible experience, never to forget. As I recall, in July I was going with my father to Stasio. This was the reunion time of the family of Friedman. My grandfather lived in the city and has his business. And he almost owned all houses in the city. He was a very wealthy man. As I recall, our family lived in the city for generations. I came to the city when my father was born, get his education. When I was a little boy, my father used to tell me about his youth. When he lived in the city, how he went to yeshiva as a young boy. And he stayed and learned till he was 16 years of age. He studied from early in the morning till late at night. In the meantime, my father have to learn Russian. Poland at this time, this part of Poland have been under the Russian occupation from 1972. And the official language was Russian. After finished the yeshiva, my father was helping my grandfather in tannery business. Till he get married, he lived in Stasio. After my father married in 1910, he moved to the city of Radom. He lived in the city, prospered. He went to the tannery business, raised a big family, and lived till the Nazi killed him in 1942 at the liquidation of the Jewish population in the ghetto of Radom. I can recall the moment when my father, my grandfather, and the uncles went to the little shul in the city. This was the evening when my grandfather was saying Kaddish in the memory of his wife, my grandmother, who died very young. After the services, the community relieved when it usually meant a parade of the Freeman's family's clan. First, my grandfather was leaving the place of prayers. My father was walking a few steps behind Uncle Simon and Uncle Jacob behind my father. They came specially from Warsaw, where they lived, to be together on this unusual occasion. Then at the end, I was walking the grandson. I always was going with my father to this unusual occasion. My grandfather was holding a little pet in his hand, full of helps lotus, like in American money, $1. The poor people of the city have been waiting a whole year to get a certain money for my grandfather. He was going, moving slowly, giving to the poor people a few zlotys. Remember, this was Poland at the beginning of the 20th century. And the Jewish population, 90% of them have been very poor. Thanks to the financial support from the Jewish community in America, the Jewish population in Poland lived, struggled to survive. Now going back to the event of Stasio, my father and the uncles have been walking slow, giving little change to the poor. This was the tradition in the Jewish way of life. For the rich, the fortunate, to give charity, tzedakah, to the poor one, that they, the poor, the unfortunate one, can go on living. This was the way the Jewish people have living, helping each other. I was going looking around with proud of my family. Wherever they lived, they support and took an active part in the life of the Jewish community. This I learned from my father, from my family, and I followed the tradition. After the war, wherever I was living, I was supporting and giving charity. So I was doing when I lived in Germany, and then after when I came to this country. Now let's go back to the life of my grandfather. As I said, my grandfather was a very educated man in the Talmud, a scholar. When I was sitting with my grandfather in summer, when I was visiting my grandfather in summer, I remember he awake early in the morning, went to the shul to pray. 9 o'clock he came back, eat a simple breakfast, a roll and a glass of milk, and then he went back to the temple to meditate till 2 o'clock. Then his working day began. He stayed at the business place till 5 o'clock. At the minute when my grandfather came to the place of business, my grandmother was leaving to home to prepare dinner. At 5 o'clock my grandfather closed the business place, went home for dinner. After he finished eating, he went back to the shul, again to study Talmud till late till midnight. This was the way my grandfather lived, mostly spending his time to study the Talmud. This was the most important goal in his life. My grandmother was the one who took care of the business and the family. This was the way my grandparents lived. Naturally, to raise a family, they had to have, especially they have a big family, they had a Polish maid at their home who have been helping. And they get paid for the work. Remember, Stasio was a little city, and the people have been happy to go to work. In this way they have been earning a living. And my grandparents had helped to raise a big family. My grandparents have 13 children. My grandfather married very young, and in a short time 6 children have been born. But my first grandmother was sick and died very young. So my grandfather married the younger sister of my grandmother. This was according to the Bible, the old law of Jewish people, the Torah. When someone married and his wife died, and she was leaving behind her little children on the wife's side, if she had a sister next in the line, have to marry the widower, the brother-in-law, that the children have a mother to take care of them. This was the law, the Jewish law, which had been written 1,000 years ago, and our people respected. This was the Jewish code, not to leave children without a mother. As all the time when I was going to my grandfather, he lived with the second wife, who was my step-grandmother. She was very wise and an educated woman. She was a businesswoman, and also a good wife, a good mother to my grandfather. The afternoon, Sunday, in my grandfather's house will stay with me as long as I live. My grandfather was sitting at a small table meditating over the Talmud. My grandmother was sitting on a rocking chair. This was the living room, which was very large. My father was sitting at a big dining table playing cards with my uncle Simon and Jacob. Uncle Elias was sitting in front of the piano, playing, accompanying Uncle Steve, who was playing the violin. I was standing listening to the beautiful music, and when I made a little noise, my grandfather turned around to look at me, and with his finger was making a sign in front of his mouth to be silent. And then he smiled at me. These are memories which I remember. Sometime my grandfather came to our home in Adam. When he was visiting our family, sometimes he came for business, buying merchandise, leather to be sold in Stasio. As I recall, Poland was at the beginning of the 20th century. A short time after Poland gained its independence, very primitive, short of good for daily use. It was a short time since they get open wide. The Jewish people had the possibility to move free around. They started to reach out to the Polish society. The Jewish youth was hungry for knowledge. We went to university to learn, to gain and know, to fit in to the new way of life. The older generation saw the freedom which they gained with the independence of Poland, give them an open road to build their life outside the ghetto. Then the Jewish people started to do business, selling and buying whichever was possible. In a short time our people have been visible all over Poland. They saw the possibility to make money. In a short time you have in Poland a few Jewish millionaires. My family belonged to this group. The young members of our family saw and used the opportunity. They have been very bright. My father and his 2 brothers, Simon and Jacob, made a lot of money. In Radom and Warsaw, the capital of Poland, they had representation of a tannery. The name Polish Ghettos of WWII. All over Poland they have representation selling leather, a product very important in the Polish economy. This was our family business. They built and had wholesale stores all over Poland. In 1928, my father with the 2 brothers, Simon and Jacob, built a home for themselves. After a short time, my 2 uncles moved to the capital of Poland.